The Parousia by J.S. Russell, James Stuart Russell. If I could recommend one book on eschatology, this was one of the first three books I was handed. I was handed this, and we covered the other two, Last Days Madness by Gary DeMar, which is an excellent work, and the best full preterist work out there, Who Is This Babylon by Don K. Preston, and this was put in my hand. And if I had to recommend one work to anyone on eschatology and trying to understand a preterist understanding, this is definitely it. The Parousia by James Stuart Russell. And it was written in the 18th century. Just amazing, considering the fact that what he had to go by. He didn't have much to go by when it comes to taking Revelation, not splitting it up like some preterists did even before him, centuries before him. Revelation 1 through 12, 1 through 11 was Jerusalem. 12 through 22 is dealing with the fall of the Roman Empire. He takes it all, except for chapter 20 as AD 70, and referring to the fall of Jerusalem. I want to read a couple things here. Gary DeMar and Kenneth Gentry and R.C. Sproul. I'll have something to say about this book. And Ed Stevens, full preterist Ed Stevens. He publishes this now, International Preterist Association. So Ed Stevens, he publishes this now, I guess. But I had this for quite a while. Let me see here. I'll read the back here, and then we'll get into the book itself. This is from Gary DeMar, author of Last Days Madness, which we covered. How many times have you struggled with the interpretation of certain biblical texts related to the time of Jesus' return, because they did not fit with the preconceived system of eschatology? Russell's Parousia takes the Bible seriously when it tells us of the nearness of Christ's return. Those who claim to interpret the Bible literally often trip over the obvious meaning of these time texts by making Scripture mean the opposite of what it unequivocally declares. Reading Russell is a breath of fresh air in a room filled with smoke and mirror hermeneutics. That's Gary DeMar. Here's what Gentry has to say. Although I do not agree with all the conclusions of J.S. Russell's The Parousia, I highly recommend this well-organized, careful, argued, and compelling written defense of preterism to serious and mature students of the Bible. It is one of the most persuasive, Gentry says, and challenging books I've ever read on the subject of eschatology, and has had a great impact on my own thinking. Russell's biblical theological study of New Testament eschatology sets a standard excellence. Now, R.C. Sproul, I believe that Russell's work is one of the most important treatments on biblical eschatology that is available to the church today. The issues raised in this volume with respect to the time frame references of the New Testament to the Parousia are vitally important, not only for eschatology, but for the future debate over the credibility of sacred scripture. Now, what he covers here is the New Testament. He begins with the Synoptics. And this was my first introduction to the parables of Christ. You saw, this is years before I got C.H. Who's it? Hod? C.H. Chod? Do I have it here? Who is it? C.H. Dodd. What went him on the parables, but they don't get into the specifics really of the fulfillment of the parables in AD 70, as Joel McDermott does, which I covered, his book Jesus versus Jerusalem, and how N.T. Wright in Jesus and the Victory of God, 250 pages devoted to the parables and the eschatology of Jesus, saying it's all AD 70. But this is my first introduction to reading the parables, and I was blown away. I thought the parables were just practical Christian teaching. But now, years later, I've come to understand that not just the kingdom parables, but all of Christ's parables refer to the denunciation of the religious leaders of the day and of the impending revolt and fall of Jerusalem from 66 to 70. So what he starts with is John the Baptist. Maybe I should read a bit about James Stuart here. Let me see when he wrote this. He originally wrote it in 1878 anonymously. He was a minister. He didn't want to get kicked out. Another edition followed 9 years later with the author's name attached. But I'm not going to read all this. I don't want to take too much time. But yeah, he wrote this way back then. I mean, he's pretty much a pioneer in a lot of ways. I mean, it's just amazing. He starts with John the Baptist, who I love. I did a video of John the Baptist. I guess, what did I call it? John the Baptist, a springboard for New Testament eschatology. But let's see here. Let's see. We can get the contents for you up there, guys. And you can go on Amazon and get the contents, I'm sure. Some books they don't let you, some books they do. You can even order this or read this online. But I'll read through this real quick. I'm not going to bother, you probably can't even see that. But yeah, he starts out with the Gospels. First he starts out with the book of Malachi. Then then between Malachi and John the Baptist. Does a good job with John the Baptist and the teaching of our Lord concerning Parousia and the Synoptic Gospels. The parable of the barren fig tree, the parables of the tares and the dragnet, the coming of the Son of Man, and the lifetime of the apostles, the parable of the unfortunate widow, the parousia to take place in the lifetime of some of the disciples. Consummation of the kingdom, parable of the pounds, Jesus lamentates over Jerusalem, the wicked husbandman, marriage of the king's son. This is Matthew chapter, this would be Luke 19, Luke 20, Matthew 21, then the marriage, Matthew 22, woes denouncing the scribes, that's Luke 13, Matthew 23, and the prophecy of the Olivet Discourse. He gets into that quite a bit. And then we get into the Gospel of John. Then we get into part 2, Acts. Then he gets into Thessalonians. And what's interesting about this work is that he devotes the last couple hundred pages like Milton Terry does in his biblical apocalyptics. He devotes a good chunk of this to a commentary on the book of Revelation. So that's very fascinating as well. But this guy was a pioneer. If you can get one book, a preterist book, and take the chance, and I actually gave my first one away to an Adventist friend. I gave this, and what else? Who's this Babylon? I gave to Gordy. I gave this first copy away. I was so impressed with it. This and Who Is This Babylon? To an Adventist friend. But yeah, if I could recommend one book on eschatology, this is it. This is it, right here. I can't say enough about it. You should be able to read it online. There used to be a site World Without End. If you Google that with this, but this should be online on other places as well. But I highly, highly recommend this work. Highly, highly recommend it. But yeah, I mean, I don't agree with everything he says in here, but just this guy was a pioneer. He wasn't leaning on other people like we are today. We're leaning on other predators. This guy was a trailblazer. J.S. Russell. Great work. Best work on eschatology.